Welcome to a line through time where Mortal Kombat Special Forces makes no Raiden damn sense. I didn't want to discuss this in the main Mortal Kombat episode because there's a lot the devs fucked up with in this one, surprise surprise, and I need to isolate this subject to explain it all properly. So let's begin by briefly summarising the storyline of the US Special Forces and the Black Dragon Crime Syndicate up to the time Special Forces released for the necessary historical context. In Mortal Kombat 1 and its prequel comic, Lieutenant Sonya Blade is pursuing Kano, leader of the Black Dragon, who is her longtime nemesis. He escapes onto the ship headed for Shang Tsung's island where the Mortal Kombat tournament takes place. Sonya follows and is captured along with her squad. Shang Tsung forces Sonya to compete in the tournament under threat of her squad being executed. Mortal Kombat 2 and its prequel comic forget all about the squad. Sonya is lost alongside Kano and Goro as Shang Tsung's island collapses. Sonya's superior, Major Jackson Briggs, sets out to find her, eventually discovering that she and Kano have been captured in Outworld. He joins up with the rest of Earth's heroes to head to Outworld and save Sonya. Shang Tsung burns Jax's top off, giving a reasonable justification for showing off John Parrish's amazing torso from then on. Sonya is eventually saved, and for whatever reason, Jax gets metallic upgrades to his arms. Whether these are replacements for his arms or simple coverings remains to this day unclear for the original timeline. In Mortal Kombat 3, Kano is hired by Shao Kahn to teach his army how to use Earthrealm firearms, while Jax and Sonya join the Earthrealm forces opposing Kahn. At some point, Kano is presumed dead, explained in Deadly Alliance as Sonya kicking him off a skyscraper. In Mortal Kombat 4, Black Dragon member Jarek, created as a replacement for Kano, is forced to work with Sonya and Jax to oppose Shinnok's invasion. Jarek runs right off a cliff in an attempt to kill Sonya, though in his Armageddon bio, Jarek claims Jax threw him off the cliff like in Jax's ending, even though that would require Sonya to have been thrown off by Jarek first, which clearly isn't the case, going off her return in the very next game. I wonder if Jax's ending is just Jarek bullshitting to make himself seem less pathetic. Then, finally, came MK Special Forces, which I've discussed in 2 previous episodes. Quick summary, the game is a prequel set at least a year prior to MK1, featuring Jax going up against the Black Dragon, which includes Kano and Jarek. Jax is out to stop Kano from getting his hands on a mystical artifact that can open portals. Sonya was supposed to co-star but got cut due to half the team leaving the company mid-development, leaving Jax as the sole protagonist. Now that we understand the storyline Special Forces was supposed to take place in, we can discuss how it simply doesn't work. Let's look at each spot the game could take place in, before, after and between the first 4 games. Special Forces is generally accepted to take place before mythologies, though I have no idea where this information comes from. The only evidence I've seen for the game's placement is that in the pre-Exodus build, Sonya's character select bio states her age is 26, the same as in the MK1 prequel comic. Similarly to Nero's origin in Devil May Cry 4, while this information didn't make it into the final game, it still tells us the time frame the developers had in mind when they made the game, so this game occurs in the same year as 1 to 3, which already contradicts the idea that it occurs prior to mythologies, which is a year before MK1. But perhaps the most glaring issue with this time frame is Jax's metal arms. He didn't get them until between MK2 and 3, but again, these might simply be exoskeleton enhancements and not full-on replacements a la Annihilation and Defenders of the Realm. It's entirely possible Jax simply stopped using them after this game until it became clear he was going to need them against Outworld. Not very likely, but it is possible. Perhaps they're retconning him to have always had the metal arms, some of you suggest. After all, retcons are nothing new to MK, which has been employing them since as early as MK2. Well, Jax's subsequent appearances in Shaolin Monks and MK 2011's retelling of MK1 and 2 both depict him with normal arms, so that can't be the case. Issue 2. If Jax is dealing with a mystical artifact that can open portals in the game, why doesn't he believe Johnny Cage's story about the island in the MK2 comic? I mean, not only does Jax know for a fact what this mystical artifact can do, he uses it himself at the end of the game. There's no answer for that one. Shaolin Monks later claimed that MK3's Cabal was still a member of the Black Dragon by as late as MK2, so then where is he? You kinda get the impression that Special Forces is an all-hands-on-deck situation for the Black Dragon, so why would Cabal not be here too, especially when he's one of the few already established members? If he's not joined yet, then his desire to reform the Black Dragon in Deception doesn't make much sense with less than a year of membership to the original version. There's also the little issue of the new timeline from MK 2011. Jax apparently kills Tremor, Tasia and No-Face during Special Forces. Granted, this could simply be an assumption since Sonya states in MK4,
"The Black Dragon died with Kano. You're the last one, Jarek."
Meaning the others are most likely killed here, but Jax doesn't do a fatality or even a neck snap, MK's go-to character killer, on any of them. They just fall down like Jarek does and he survives. But if they do die here, then how can they still be around in MKX if they got killed prior to Raiden changing the timeline? This really only works if the Black Dragon are alive by at least MK1, and Raiden's tampering with the timeline allows allows them to survive. I mean, sure, the timeline is already altered beyond recognition before Raiden receives his visions, but still. And yes, resurrection is a prominent thing in MK, but who the fuck would even bother resurrecting No-Face or Tasia? Come on. Ultimately, the statuses of both Jax and the Black Dragon don't really mesh well with MK1, so that's out. We can't place it between MK1 and 2 because Kano and Sonya are trapped in Outworlds from the end of 1 to the end of 2. Okay, let's try placing it between MK2 and 3 then. Supposing Kano's cohorts were captured prior to / during MK1, Kano could have freed them here in preparation for the invasion. The new timeline point still stands, as we don't hear about any of this going down between the two stories in MK 2011, and the timeline hasn't really diverged enough to outright prevent special forces from taking place here compared to the original timeline. Jax knows about magic by this point though, and will have the arms by MK3, so that's a point in its favour. It also allows Cabal to be absent, having seemingly left the group by this point with or without MK 2011's Becoming a Cop storyline. We're getting there, but it's not quite right. Between MK3 and 4 then? I mean, Kano's MK vs DCU outfit looks a fair bit like the Special Forces one, and that game splits off after MK3. But again, we already know that Kano was kicked off a skyscraper by Sonya and saved by Motaro, who was murdered by Shiva, who then plotted with Kano to assassinate Khan, only for Kano to betray her to earn Khan's favour, at which point he stayed in Outworld until Armageddon. There's just no room for Special Forces to take place there, and it can't come after MK4 because Jarek's Armageddon bio makes it very clear that he went underground after being dropped off the cliff and was presumed dead until he resurfaced. So really, it doesn't fit anywhere, which sadly isn't all that surprising. I think the best you could possibly get is this. Jax's metal arms are just covering his real arms in the original timeline, a voluntary upgrade Jax took after MK2, in which he first encountered the monstrous races of Outworld. Sonya is still recovering from the events of the first two games, but Kano was up and at him much quicker for whatever reason, possibly through Outworld sorcery. Perhaps Kano is after the artifact on orders from / as a defection gift for Shao Kahn. He busts his allies out of prison while Sonya is laid up in bed, leaving Jax as the only one who can stop him. Jax kills all but Jarek and Kano. Jarek is presumed dead until MK4, and Kano escapes custody during Khan's invasion, which temporarily claims the souls of all but a handful of Earth's inhabitants such as Sonya, Jax and Kano. In the second timeline, Raiden, Johnny and Jax are able to free Sonya early, sending Jax along a different path, which leads him into an encounter with Ermac where he loses his arms. This leaves Jax unable to prevent Kano from freeing his cohort, but Sonya's too worried about Jax to do anything about it until he recovers. As a result, Tremor, Tasia and probably No-Face too survive for at least the next 22 years. And this is ignoring Shaolin Monks in MK 2011 retconning Kano to have always been working for Shao Kahn since at least MK1, as well as other random shite that was arbitrarily changed in those games. So, long story short, Special Forces doesn't really work anywhere, especially post-reboot. Maybe it's not canonical then. It's possible, but why bother bringing Tasia back? I get Jarek appearing in the comic because he was from the main series first, and Tremor was going to be appearing in MKX as a DLC character, but Tasia doesn't really need to come back. The fact that they even bothered supports the idea that Special Forces is still considered canon. Mortal Kombat Special Forces is currently a bigger part of the MK canon than any of the first 7 fighting games, and that's just...
Harakiri.
Remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Major. You did.
I lied.